Hi, this is Bears. We're going to come at you with a video to prove a point about 90s fighters. Right now we have Lennox Lewis pulled up. We're going to take a look at Lennox Lewis. We're going to talk about the 90s fighters, some call greats. You're not going to hear me refer to these guys as greats, or I'm going to put them in their place here. In relevance to this era, and other eras. I want to start with Lennox Lewis and firstly acknowledge that Lennox Lewis did dominate the 90s, and I think he is the great out of the 90s, the number one fighter of the 90s. He never did meet Riddick Bowe in the professional level, but he did beat Riddick Bowe for he won gold representing Canada and defeated Riddick Bowe. And they never met again. Riddick Bowe dodged him in the professional level, and so we don't have that. But take a quick look to start off this with some good stuff. Lennox Lewis, we look at his record. He has 44 total fights with 32 knockouts. So we're gonna get our calculator out. We're gonna look at what this KO percentage is and wins. We're gonna take 32 divided by 44, and we're gonna see just exactly where Lennox Lewis lies in KO. Okay, he's got a 72% KOs in his wins. He's not up there in the 90 percentile like the Klitschko's, though he did fight competition much like the Klitschko's fight. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about in this video how Holyfield's not great and how Riddick Bowe's not that great because they fought each other, took each other's blows. That doesn't make them great. We're going to break down their resumes. We're going to look at their fights. But we're going to start off with Lewis here, and we're just going to show how Lewis dominated an era, and he topped it off with Vitaly Klitschko. In the next video segment, we're going to break this down because this speaks volumes about both the greats Vitaly Klitschko and Lennox Lewis. But right now, we're going to talk about the 90s fighters, and we'll start here with Lennox Lewis's resume. Lennox Lewis, like most people in their early careers, they're filling their careers up with people you never heard of. They're just starting out in the professional level, and they're getting their seasoning. Same thing happens here, like everywhere. He's got some first round stoppages, second round. He does pretty good, and then he's ending a lot of his fights by KO earlier, which is a good sign, and he's stopping his opponents in the first half of the fight. So that's good. He's climbing up. He's beating the fighters available to him, and then he encounters Oliver McCall, who derails him completely in 2 rounds, knocks him out, takes his legs out from underneath him. They go noodles. Totally chin checked. He fights Tommy Morrison and beats Tommy Morrison. Ray Mercer takes on Oliver McCall and beats him in 5 rounds. At this point, he's 30-1, only losing to Oliver McCall. He fights Andrew Galata. Now, Shannon Briggs, these guys aren't greats. They're just good contenders like we have now in the 90s. And Evander Holyfield, we're going to talk about next, that he wasn't that great. But, David Tua, he sauced all these guys. He came out on top of everything the 90s had. Lewis was the cream of the crop. The 90s were not any better than this era. Mike Tyson, that was just a shell. Mike Tyson was done after Buster Douglas. So let's take a look at Mike Tyson now. To start off the beginning of the 90s era, Mike Tyson comes in from the 80s. Now Mike Tyson is a very well-known fighter. Good record of 58 total fights, 44 KOs, 50 wins and 44 KOs. That's a good knockout ratio. That's going to probably be better than Lewis's. But he didn't fight the competition Lewis fought. In fact, every time Mike Tyson fought decent competition, he withered and capitulated under it. He capitulated under C-level cab driver Buster Douglas. Buster Douglas is not a great. Buster Douglas did nothing after derailing Mike Tyson. Buster Douglas kind of rose against the odds. He had just recently lost his mom, and he rose against the odds that night in Tokyo and absolutely derailed Mike Tyson. Now, I'm perplexed where to put Mike Tyson in greatness because he had some awesome, brutal knockouts. I love the guy inside of the ring, outside of the ring. But what happened? Why did this guy capitulate? Why did he have the shortest peak of any fighter. I don't know. The 80s and 90s in America are known for being steroid generations. I'm not saying Mike Tyson did steroids, but look at what the 18-year-old looked like, and look at how he fizzled out so fast. You know, I don't know if steroids ever played a part, and I'm not going to say that. All I'm going to say is the era was definitely noted for steroid use. Whether or not you got busted for it or not, that's another deal. Tyson ended up losing to McBride and Williams later in his career. These are shells. Tyson was just never recaptured really what he had in the 80s, his brutal knockouts when he made this aura of invincibility. Well, he never really was invincible, and whenever he faced a decent opponent, he got smoked here. He fights Buster Douglas, gets smoked. He fights all these guys. He fights a Grandpa Holmes. I'm not gonna call these other guys really great. So I'm just not gonna say that. So on the greatness level, Tyson unfortunately gets dropped because when he fights decent comp, he capitulates. He's not very good. And a lot of guys that you wouldn't think would beat him. So I'm not gonna give Mike Tyson this huge great status. And then we looked at Evander Holyfield. I'm not going to credit Evander Holyfield as being a great because he beat a shell of Mike Tyson. That's not great. He's a feather fist. We look at Holyfield, 44 wins, 29 knockouts. That's like 66% KO percentage, and then he's got a whopping 10 losses. 10 losses is unreal. And he fought a lot of draws. He had draws and decisions. For me, it was boring to watch this guy. He was a feather fist, and he loses to John Ruiz. He loses to Chris Bird, James Toney. Guys like this. So I'm not Sultan Ibragimov, Nikolai Valuev. Now, granted, this was later in his career, but he also loses to Larry Donald, and he gets dominated. He doesn't get dominated, but he hangs in there, but he loses all kinds of fights. He loses to Lennox Lewis. He loses to Riddick Bowe. And Riddick Bowe's only fight at the professional level of note is Holyfield. And as you'll see in Holyfield's career, he pounded out a decision over Ray Mercer. I don't know how significant. I wouldn't call him great because he did that. Mike Tyson, definitely not calling him great. Look, Michael Moore beat Holyfield. That's Michael Moore's only note. If you look at Michael Moore's record, it's terrible outside of Holyfield. It's just terrible. He gets beat by Grandpa Foreman. Holyfield beats on Grandpa Foreman, as you can see. He beats on Larry Holmes, Grandpa Foreman. What is George Foreman doing fighting in '91 and Holmes fighting in '92? These guys are way past it, and they're not a feather in anybody's cap at this time. So going through Holyfield's record, decisions to start off his career. He's not knocking everybody out brutally. He's got all these decisions. Look at this 15-rounder with a guy named Dwight Muhammad Kwawi. 15 rounders with no-namers. Just a feather fist. And all these decisions, draws, and everything. I'm not going to sit here and call Holyfield a great. And I'm not going to call Riddick Bowe a great because the only one on Riddick Bowe's resume of note is Holyfield. And as we just pointed out, Holyfield's not that great. So that's where we're going to leave it. That's where the jury's at in my mind. These guys weren't that great. But I wanted to touch on the similarities between Corey Sanders and Mike Tyson because coincidentally, a few years ago, Corey Sanders and Mike Tyson were kind of touring the world, doing a little boxing act. And they weren't really fighting. I don't know how much of an act it was, but it was kind of cool. And I kind of looked at the two, and coincidentally enough, Corey Sanders, similar to Mike Tyson, and even more than Lennox Lewis, had all kinds of first-round knockouts in the beginning of his career. He was wiping through everyone, and even later in his career, he comes through with like a first and second round knockouts. Here, two round knockouts later on in his career before he left. Now, Vitaly Klitschko gave him an ungodly beating, a kind we've never seen before, which his head probably still rings from today. But Vitaly Klitschko gave Corey Sanders the worst beating we've ever seen. One of them I've ever seen, with his ear all cauliflowered and all kinds of crap. And if you've never seen Vitaly Klitschko fight him, you got to see it because it was bad. And Larry Merchant talked about being saying, "Do you think any other heavyweights could evoke such tears?" You know, Larry Merchant says he's basically crying at the beating Corey Sanders honorably takes, and you can't take a lot away from him. He did fluke win. He came in and beat a young, unrefined Vladimir Klitschko, and Vlad didn't have a jab, and you can never take that away from him. But Vlad would beat him in a rematch, which Corey never accepted. Corey clocked the crap out of Hasim Rahman, but Hasim Rahman weathered the storm. And as you can see, Corey Sanders is really dangerous in the first rounds, second rounds. And look at this guy's record. It's filled with first round knockouts and all kinds of first, second round knockouts and ending fights in the first half of the fight. I mean, all the way up to 23 fights. This guy is just knocking pretty much everybody out on average in the first round. First few rounds. Look at all these number one knockouts. So he's kind of similar to Mike Tyson in that respect, where he just came in wreck and shop, and he was really dangerous. So I wanted to take a look at that. Now you know where they stand in greatness. I don't think Mike Tyson and Holyfield and Rick Bowe are all that great, and that's why we take a look at their resumes, and that's what we're gonna see. You tell me why they're great. I've told you why I don't think they're all that great. Lennox Lewis is great for dominating all these guys and being kind of a tier above them. So next we're going to look at the meetings of the greats, Vitaly Klitschko and Lennox Lewis.